Here we are with Todd Martin, CEO of Newport Hall of Fame, and Steve Flink, an old friend of mine who is very worried because he said with Todd Martin we would need 2 hours because we have to describe his wins. Also some losses, not many, but some.
But we're not going to spend much time, I hope, on 1998 Davis Cup. Todd deserves better than that.
Yeah, okay. Well, I know he doesn't want to talk about Milwaukee, so I may not talk about it. And even if I was almost so, how can I say, naughty, that I was thinking to call Sanguinetti to be part of this meeting. For whoever doesn't know about it, we will talk about that later. But I want first to introduce Todd Martin, especially to the Italian crowd, because I mean they don't know maybe that first of all he won 8 tournaments and he lost 12 finals. But in my opinion, he's one player that should have won many more tournaments. That's my opinion, because if you make all the semifinals and finals he has made in the slams, in big tournaments, I mean, and he was number 4 in the world, in my opinion, he should have won 20 tournaments. What do you think, Todd?
I think I should have won 120, but listen, I was never, and probably to a fault. I mean, for most of my life, it was and certainly my career in tennis, it was a huge asset that I was very process oriented. Looking back at it, there are probably some moments that I should have been a touch more focused on the result and doing what was necessary. But I wouldn't trade the experience for the world.
Well, first of all, I must say that someone who wins 411 matches on the ATP circuit is not too bad. I mean, it's you cannot complain about that.
Ubaldo also, he can't complain too much either, and it was a great achievement to reach 2 Grand Slam finals: the Australian Open against Sampras in '94, and then the final against Agassi in the U.S. Open in '99. So Todd did some great things in the preeminent events.
No, sure, and we cannot forget those, and he cannot forget. I mean, which one do you remember the most? I mean, of those 2 lost finals, even if maybe you would prefer to talk about winning matches. But okay, you know, with Sampras, you lost 7-6, 6-4, 6-4 in '94. With Agassi, I will tell you later something that happened to me while I was watching your match.
Okay, so listen, I think that I think those 2 stories are so interconnected for me and maybe even for the sport. You look at Andre and Pete and their shared dominance of our sport in the '90s, especially in the U.S. When you say the score against Pete, 7-6, 6-4, 6-4, I sort of chuckled to myself because it wasn't even that close. You know, I for a moment in the first set, I probably was level with him, if not perhaps outplaying him, which was not uncommon against Pete. He'd let you outplay him for a period of time, and then he'd sort of just push the magic button. But then I was down 2 breaks in the second and third, but really the core thing about that match that I recall is how unprepared I was for the match. I didn't sleep the night before. I couldn't eat the morning of. I was very ready to make a Grand Slam final. I was not ready to play in a Grand Slam final. And that was a wake-up call probably unlike many others that I had during my career. And then I look at my match against Andre as being very much evidence that I had grown up, that I was a better tennis player. I had more control over what my mind was doing on the court and off the court, and I matched up better against Andre. So I played better. I felt like I was competitive. Not even. I mean, even in the fourth and fifth set, where Andre won both sets fairly handily, I felt more competitive in those sets than I did in the close sets that I had with Pete, because I was the best I could be at that moment. Whereas against Pete, I was a shadow of what I thought I could be at that moment in Melbourne.
Sure. Todd, the match with Andre, though, you played so well the first three sets especially, and you won tiebreakers in the second and third set, and he only broke you that one time in the first set. And it seemed, I remember sitting there with the other reporters, and we thought if you could get it done in four, and Andre didn't sort of grind you down and turn it into more of a physical match, that it looked entirely possible. Did you feel confident going into the fourth set of that match?
I felt supremely confident. To me, I hadn't wavered. I took lots of Andre's best shots, and I was still ahead. And Andre was a different competitor in '99 than he would have been in '98.
Right.
But for me, it was unsuccessful, but it was also nice to demand of Andre his very best.
And he acknowledged that, Todd. He acknowledged that after the match too. He said you really did demand a lot of him, and that he felt like there could have been two winners that day.
Well, listen, I mean, the most important thing in that match was not my serve, was not his return, was not my ability to come to the net and his ability to pass me. The most important thing, and it wasn't physical conditioning either, which I know a lot of people would chalk it up to. The dictator of that result was who was the better competitor on the day. We were sent out on the court to play 3 out of 5 sets, and to compete and fight and get the best out of ourselves for that duration. And he just did a better job of it than I did. And I wouldn't say I did a bad job of it. I just didn't do as well as he did.
Listen, may I say something about the match with Sampras? Well, I remember, because you are very serious tonight, but maybe it is because we were kind of wizards, because we didn't expect that today when we are talking, it was the day that you had to erase the tournament of the Newport tournament and the Hall of Fame ceremony, which we will talk about that a little later. But so that is maybe the reason why you look so serious. But I want to remember that when Sampras announced in 2002 that he was going to retire, and they asked you, Todd, are you sorry for that? You said, I'm not sorry at all. He was killing me all the time, which wasn't exactly true, because at the end you won 4 times against him, and also in some important tournaments. And when Sampras won Wimbledon in '94, you were the only one who took a set out of him that year.
Yeah, Ubaldo, let me just briefly interject on that. Todd, do you feel, you said about '99, and Ubaldo's bringing up the semi against Pete in '94 Wimbledon. You also made the semis of the Open that year and lost to Andre. So 3 of the 4, you were finals and 2 semis. That was, what, you feel like you were a better player in '99? Because those were that was your best Grand Slam season in '94.
I was a much better player in '99 than I was in '94. I might, I think in '94, I was probably the beneficiary of having organized myself in a way that I hadn't previously organized my game, and I was physically imposing. And I think I just was playing at a pace that was of greater challenge for the general player body in '94. In '99, I was one. I had much better sustained success throughout the whole calendar, as opposed to peaking at the right time with the slams. But in '99, my success was because I felt like I was the best tennis player I ever was during that time. Mentally, physically, tactically, skill production wise, everything. That was the peak of my performance and of my maturity as an athlete.
And of course, that US Open final took you up to your peak career ranking #4 in the world. Did you feel at that stage you might make a bid to go higher? I mean, was that one of your goals?
Of course, you never expect your peak to be your peak. That's the beauty of it. Peak is typically in the rearview mirror, and you realize, well, I was a little higher a while ago. My peak just so happened to be a pinpoint. I was #4 for just a moment. Now, I don't deem peaks to be based on ranking. I deem peaks to be based on performance, and I was really disappointed not to be able to sustain the level of play that I achieved in those last few months worth of '98 and the first 9 months of '99. However, I still felt like I played decently well the next few years of my career.
Listen, I have a personal, that normally when I'm watching the slams, especially at the US Open, I like to sit next to Steve Flink, because so I can tell him what's going on. I can explain how the match goes through. And
no, why don't you, Ubaldo,
yeah.
tell Todd about the ongoing dialogue we have over notepads during matches.
During matches, Steve, to cover a match with his stats, he needs about 25, 30 pages. I need one. I need one very precise, but where there is everything. I can, immediately resume everything in one page. And I said, you are wasting so much paper, Steve, that you shouldn't be allowed to cover tennis anymore. But apart from that, and we have a lot of fun discussing this, because of course he prefers his way of doing it. But there is one thing. When you played Agassi, I was instead next to the French journalist Philippe Bouen of L'Equipe. You may remember him. He's a very nice friend and great colleague. And suddenly, Philippe, who had all his how do you call, binoculars, he saw Steffi Graf watching your final up in the standings. I mean, very where the people where the tickets are less expensive, and I don't know how, but he saw her and say, "What, Ubaldo? What Steph is doing watching this match between Todd and Andrea Agassi? Why is she there? Why?" And that was the first glimpse we had. There must be a reason. Either she likes Todd Martin or she likes Andrea Agassi. That was there. And the same night, a friend of mine who was owner of a restaurant in Tribeca, told me, that Andrea Agassi and Steffi Graf were having dinner together. So I had a scoop. Thanks on a gossip scoop, because nobody knew at that time that there was some kind of feeling going through those two guys. So that is something that I will never forget. It's not so important, but it's funny.
Now, did you give credit to Philippe for identifying that?
I can't remember. Yeah. I said that Philippe was the one who showed it to me. So I've always been honest on that. You know, I'm always waiting for a similar scoop from Steve, but that is difficult to have.
But Ubaldo, I want Todd to just go back to two other things before I forget.
Go.
One, the 95 Davis Cup, where you played the doubles with Pete and the Americans beat Russia in Russia is a big deal. Indoor clay, that clearly was a career highlight. And going back to the Open in 2000, when you made the semis again after having been in the final the previous year and had the great win over Moya from 2 sets to love down and later saving a match point and ended at 122 in the morning and you're high-fiving the crowd. And start with the Davis Cup and then go to that 2000 Open, because I don't want us to leave those moments out.
Yeah, 95 Davis Cup. In the U.S., I played on a high school tennis team when I was 14 to 17. I played on a collegiate tennis team when I was 18, 19, and 20, or 18 and 19. And then to imagine when I turned professional at 20 years old, to imagine that I would have eventually play Davis Cup for the U.S. was honestly a far-fetched dream, but it was a dream. And making the trip over to Moscow with our team was really interesting. Moscow was not a bright place, especially in November of '95.
A lot of snow. A lot of snow. I was there at
Yep.
the Krem, in Olympic Stadium next to the Pent Hotel.
That's right. And so, and we played on indoor clay, and the stories were that every night they let the water flood the court so that the clay could be as slow as possible so that Sampras would be neutralized on the dirt. And we went over there, and Jim Courier and Pete Sampras were the singles players, and I was going to play doubles with Richie Renneberg. And we were all looking at Jim, I think even Pete, as we need you to be sort of the workhorse to get us through this weekend and give us a chance. On that first day, Pete played just an amazing match against Andrei Chesnikov.
6-4 in the fifth, and he was taken out of the court cramping.
Right.
At match point.
Yeah. At match point, he went into a full body cramp after he won the match. And then, you know, I think those cramps were certainly partially physically induced, but for sure from all the nerves that were running through him. And we woke up the next morning, and Richie and I were getting ready to go out to the practice court, and our captain Tom Gullickson said Pete wants to play doubles, and I think Richie couldn't have put his rackets away any quicker and said, "Have fun out there." And we beat a good team, and Andrei Orlovsky and Yevgeny Kafelnikov. I honestly felt like I played really well and did what I was supposed to do with Pete as a partner, which is sort of play the straight man, hit the returns low cross court, hit a good first serve and play, make my volleys. And Pete was spectacular. Pete rose to the occasion, both from a take the responsibility to lead the team, but also his tennis was really quite good on the day as well. And then he played another great match against Yevgeny on that final Sunday.
Sorry if I interrupt you just 1 second, but I remember that when Pete came back to United States, he said that in a way it was like United States had not realized what kind of exploit of great matches he had played and you had played. I mean, so in America there was not so much, how do you say, back?
Yeah. I mean, that's. I don't know. In some ways, I think that's. I always loved playing away Davis Cup ties more than home Davis Cup ties. I loved the notion of going somewhere else and trying to make it quiet as opposed to being home and trying to make it loud. Okay. And I think that if with that comment from Pete, I look at it and say, that's not what we're playing for. We're not playing to make sure that the public recognizes our greatness. We're playing to challenge ourselves to achieve greatness. And you know, so it was a disappointing. It was a disappointment or a letdown for Pete when the moment should have been spectacularly high. You know, had I won 14 Grand Slams in my career, I probably would have looked at that and said, well, wait a second, I win Wimbledon and I'm adored, and I win the US Open and I'm celebrated, and then I win Davis Cup with my team, and it's a forgotten achievement. I don't look at that same experience the same way. I also didn't act like Hercules over in Moscow. I sort of just carried Hercules' bag. So I think that's where all things are in the eyes of the beholder. You know, I never felt as good and as close and collegial as I did when we were playing Davis Cup away. We only had each other, you know, just there were probably a grand total of 10 of us between team and practice partners, captain and trainer and so forth. And we were together. We were the platoon, and we didn't, and there wasn't anything else that got in the way. And I love that. Love that.
So Todd, now jump to the 2000 Open, if you would. You know, you were so proud of what you did the year before, but you really had a great tournament in 2000 as well, and capped off by the Moya win from 2 sets down, and the high-fiving the crowd after. So was that one of the more gratifying moments of your career, particularly at your country's championship?
Yeah. So, you know, I just talked about playing Davis Cup away. I will say the one place I loved loudness was in Arthur Ashe Stadium at Flushing Meadow. The journey from the beginning to of the tournament to the semifinals in 2000 was really very similar to the journey I took in '99 from the beginning of the tournament to the finals. When you
played Ruseski, also with Ruseski, you were, I think, down 4-1 in the 5th, correct?
Yeah. So also, Ubaldo, Ruseski served for the match in the 3rd set. It could have been straight sets. That was a great comeback for Todd. 99.
The match ended up at 3 o'clock in the morning or 2 o'clock in the morning, I think, if I remember well. And when Steve, you were mentioning that he was going around doing "Give Me 5" to all the people. Which match was that? Because
that was Moya.
More than once, or only Moya, or Ruseski?
I only remember it. Todd might remember more. I only remember him doing it against Moya, but I think it seemed, Todd, uncharacteristic. I mean, it was great to see you let loose like that. And you said after that match, you know, I feel terrible, but I feel great. Do you remember saying that? Because you obviously was draining, but it was such an exhilarating feeling to make the comeback.
So, I said I felt terrible, but I felt great after one of your colleagues asked me where I was physically.
Okay.
And my response was, physically, I am right here. Would you like to know where I am metaphysically? That's my one good quote of my career. But the match against Ruseski in '99 and the match against Moya in 2000, 2 entirely different opponents, but very similar matches. I got into a big hole against both of them. I was playing against players who were playing well on the day also, and both blinked just for a moment. And that little blink gave me the opportunity to start a comeback. And then in spite of not having all of my physical strength and stamina with me, because I was focused on the task at hand and really in the moment, and I always felt way more in the moment when I was behind than when I was level or ahead. It was just so much easier. This is the one point that I have to play right now. Let's play the best way we can.
But still,
both of those were the second Tuesday night. Both fourth round matches, the second Tuesday night. So they were anniversary matches, and they're two of the matches I won. They are two of the better memories that I have.
So Todd, the flip side of the coin, the obvious flip side, I hate to bring it up, but would be the Mal Washington Wimbledon semi of '96. Because I bring it for two reasons. You're led 5-1 in the fifth, and you were so close, serving for the match twice, and he eventually came back and won and lost to Krajicek in the final. And part two of the question is, don't you think you would have had a pretty decent chance had you beaten Mal to beat Krajicek in that final, retrospectively? Do you believe that?
They were 1-1, Todd and Krajicek.
Right, and the loss though, but the loss, Ubaldo, Todd was up 2-0 at the U.S. Open with match points in the third set tiebreak against Richard. So he certainly knew 93, right? And you know where it was played, of course, in the grandstand. But anyway, how about that, Todd? What do you think?
My world right now is in business is trying to figure out how to make money while we're losing money, right? Everybody in the world is losing money, and revenues that we had anticipated are not happening. So we have to imagine how else to make revenue. It is not so easy as to just say, if we do this, and this, we will replace those lost revenues. So we talk a lot about speculation or the speculative nature of revenue. And I say it's all speculation.
Okay.
Sure.
That's how I felt back then as a competitor as well. Like, sure, I'm close to beating Mal, and I was distracted. I was thinking, well, I'll either play Richard or Jason Stoltenberg, and I match up decently well with both of them. What a great opportunity. And lo and behold, there goes Mal Washington right past me and into the finals. The notion of looking backwards and speculating is even crazier for me. So but the fact of the matter is, my game matched up decently well against everybody. I served well, I returned well, I was disciplined. The reason I didn't win more tournaments is because I played almost every day about this well. I didn't play a lot of days that well. And so I would have walked out on the court, whether it was Richard Krajicek in the finals, Andre in the finals, Pete in the finals, or Joe from down the street in the finals. I would have said, in the finals of Wimbledon, I've won 6 matches. I've won 6 best-of-5 set matches on this course. Why in the world shouldn't I win 7?
Exactly. Well, I think Ubaldo and I, being historians, it's hard for us not to look back and think about moments like that. And the reason I say it is that Sampras had won Wimbledon 93 through 95. Krajicek beat him in the quarters that year, and then Pete won 4 more in a row after that. So this was that brief window. And I just feel like, having seen you play him in the grandstand that day at the 93 Open, that And Richard, that was his only major, and it was his first final. So, and so I just feel like, you ask me, I say Todd Martin would have won Wimbledon that year if you'd beaten Matt.
Let me put it this way. I would have much rather played Richard Krajicek or Mal Washington in my first Grand Slam final than Pete Sampras. But at the same time, you know, that would have been my second, and that would have been at some point in time I would have and you saw it in '99 when I played Andre. You know, like I was more mature. I would have been confident walking out on the court. Not that I would win, but that I would have every reason to believe that I had a fair shot of winning.
Listen, since Steve is always running ahead, and he keeps away, you know, I have other things to say, and he starts going from Wimbledon and all this. It doesn't give me the time to remember. You were talking about Rosecki, and I can remember that you won 20 of the last 21 points. So, which, I mean, for a player that sometimes was accused to have not a long, too much endurance, and you were called a marathon man. You won 8 matches coming back from 2 sets to love, not just those ones that we just mentioned. So that was quite incredible in a way, because I mean.
Todd, what do you think was the key that you're down 4-1 in the 5th, and as Ubaldo said, you win 20 out of 21 points. So you got on an incredible roll there, and Greg was a great server. What enabled you to go on that spree?
Well, first of all, Ubi, I came back from 2 sets of love 9 times. So
okay. Oh, one more. Well, I found it 8, so I must have missed one.
It's the one record I hold. Don't take it away from me.
Okay.
So, you know, listen, you look at if I look at it from a anecdotal standpoint, the Davis Cup tie between Australia and the US in Boston 2 months before my match with Ruzetsky in '99, I took an intravenous fluid bag before the match with Pat Rafter. I went up 2 sets to love. I lost the 3rd and the 4th, and I believe I was up 4-1 in the 5th. My memory's not great, but I believe I was up 4-1 in the 5th, and Pat came back and beat me either 6-4 or 7-5 in the 5th. That memory doesn't go away. And the only way I could rationalize it and remain sane as a competitor was to have creative psychology. And the way I would always look at it is, if somebody can come back against me, why in the world can't I come back against them? And so down 2 sets to love against Greg, it was not like I was buoyed with hope. I mean, I was challenged. I did not necessarily believe that I was going to win that match, but I knew that I had to keep on trying and doing my best. Down 4-1 in the 5th, also, you know, against Greg, that with his serve, that's a remote chance. But I said earlier, I was most in the quote unquote moment when I was behind, and I would never have won 20 out of 21 points against my mother if I were in the lead. I know that, and that's a huge flaw in my makeup as a tennis player. However, it's just fact. I just wouldn't be able to do that. I love to struggle. I am, I'm a masochist in my own way. Jose Higueras, who was my career-long mentor, once said, you know, some boxers don't like to fight until they get hit. Okay. And they taste their own blood. And for me, there's a lot of that in me. I love getting hit just so I can hit somebody back.
Okay. fun, interesting. I was thinking also when you mentioned the fact that in Moscow they were pouring rain on the court. I had been in Moscow on the semi when Russia played Germany, and there was a women's tournament with an Italian tennis player in the same stadium. And so one night, the night before the first day of the Davis Cup semifinals, Russia-Germany, I leave the court, I leave the stadium, and I see Tatiana Naumko, who was the coach of Andrei Chesnokov, with 10 people pouring water on the court, because the next day there was Boris Becker and Michael Stick who had to play. And the next day they had to postpone the beginning of the match of 1 hour, because when Becker went on court, he was moving mud, not clay. And I was the one who said to them, you know, because nobody knew what happened, because by chance I left the stadium the night before at 8:30, and they all had left, and I saw all these things with the water, and it was incredible. And anyway, that was a memory of mine. But anyway, so let's go back to you, because we are interviewing you and not myself. First of all, I couldn't forget that you retired after you lost to Santoro, and it was 31st of August, which is my birthday. So, you know, I have to remember. That was 2004. But I must remind you, unfortunately, also about Milwaukee. We talk about that. With Sanguinetti, because, I mean, Italy went to Milwaukee, we were almost sure to lose. I mean, even if there was the other singles player was Jean-Michel Gambit, who was not probably the best Davis Cup player the United States had at that time. But, well, Sanguinetti won 3 sets on the tiebreaker, because normally you were very, very good on tiebreakers. You lost 7-6, 7-6, 7-6. Almost unbelievable for me. I was there. Was it unbelievable for you too?
So, what year was that? 98?
Yes.
So, I would have said at the moment, I was surprised. Looking back at it and understanding, I would say, in knowing Davide better now than I knew him then, I would say I'm not surprised. What I remember from that tie was, it was the first time in my career where I felt like an indoor court was really quite slow, and the balls were heavy and got fluffed up quickly. And if you look at, if I were to go out and play Davide again in that scenario, I would have played him much differently. But I tried to play him the way I liked to play, as opposed to understanding the way he didn't want somebody to play against him. And so I actually think if I would have gone out to play more like I was Fabrice Santoro and less like I was Todd Martin, I would have had better success against him, trying to put a different style of play out in front of him.
Okay. Listen, you started your first match by coincidence in ATP circuit was played in Newport, correct? Yes. In 1990. And now in Newport, you're the boss. I mean, you're the CEO. I mean, nobody. I mean, you don't even have to regret about the fact that Steve Flink is an Hall of Famer, because it wasn't you. You weren't there when he was named, or you were.
I was.
You were. Were you responsible for that? I mean,
no.
I will never forgive you. I will never forgive you.
Yeah, Ubi, that's an impressive tidbit of information that My first ATP match was in Newport, the summer of '90. I was still an amateur.
Yeah.
I qualified. I won my first round. I beat some very good players during that time frame. I was to play Darren Cahill in the second round, and it's the only match of my career that I defaulted because of sickness or injury. And I also defaulted a match when my newborn son was going into surgery. So I had to leave San Jose later in my career. But so Newport, first ATP event as an amateur. Forest Hills, the second home of the U.S. Nationals or U.S. Open, was my last tournament as an amateur. And the U.S. Open, Flushing Meadows, was my first tournament as a professional. So pretty unique. And the notion that I am now the CEO of the Hall of Fame, it's a charmed life, and it's a story that I could have never imagined writing myself. But that's the beauty of life. You get on the journey, and you go where it takes you.
And what about the Hall of Famer Steve Flink? I mean, do you regret that moment, or?
I regret it. Oh, there are some Hall of Famers that we've already spoken about, like Pete Sampras and Andre Agassi, that I regret. Not Steve Flink. No, listen, I think that the beauty of my job in many ways is that I don't have to have an opinion about anybody else. I just have to run the business. And but I think we have 257 Hall of Famers currently. It'll be more than a year before we have 259 at least, with Conchita and Goran being inducted. But I think we've got 257 most deserving individuals as members of the Hall of Fame. And each one of them has different resume attributes, are different people, have different perceptions from the public. But have all achieved and done so much for our sport. And, so in all honesty, absolutely no regrets to be able to invest.
Listen, but there are also two Italians there, Nicola Pietrangeli, Mr. Davis Cup man, because he played 164 matches in Davis Cup. Nobody will ever play so many, because the Davis Cup is not anymore the one it was. And then Gianni Clerici, who's a nice and great colleague of ours with Steve. We know him very well, and I spoke with him recently. He's still fine, he's still writing. He's 90 years old, which means 40 years more than you, Todd, because you will be 50 on the 8th of July, 3 days before the tournament in Newport had to start. So you probably didn't want to celebrate your birthday just before the tournament, which will not be held.
Todd, how difficult was it to have to make that announcement today? Obviously, you've been bracing yourself for it, but to have the tournament canceled and the ceremony not able to be held, and had you been sort of preparing yourself for this moment, or were you hoping against hope that it could be avoided?
No, we've known. It's amazing to think that the sports world's disruption, interruption, however you want to refer to it, it's really amazing that it's only just a little bit more than 2 months now. It feels like an epic at this point in time. When the sports world in early to mid-March started to pause activity, my initial rationale was we're still 4 months away. We've got to continue to do our preparations as if nothing would be any different. And then we started to amend some of those preparations, how do we satisfy various constituencies? How do we provide for everybody's safety and well-being? But it's probably been close to 4 weeks where I, at least personally, I tried not to share it too much within my staff because there's still a lot of work to do in case we're able to have the event at that time. But probably about 4 weeks ago, I'd gotten to the point where I would have been really surprised, if not shocked, that we would have had the opportunity to host our events. So it has today has no meaning necessarily, no significance to me, other than it is in some ways a load off of my mind. We can really and truly focus strictly on the future, how best to celebrate Goran and Conchita in 2020, how to make a massive celebration out of July 2021, and really reimagine a business model that it's vulnerable. I mean, we're all vulnerable in professional tennis, I think, to some degree, and this year has been a slap across the face on that front. So from a business standpoint, there's a lot to solve for, and from the Hall of Fame's perspective, as far as representing the history of our sport, being a great deliverer of our mission. In some ways, I think we're doing a better job today than we ever have. Our digital exhibits that are being promoted on social media and on our website, they're stunning. They tell a great story. The one that we just released here in the last week is called "When the Tennis Stopped," and it talks about World War I, World War II, and the last time our sport and our society experienced this type of interruption. So it's onward and upward. It might be onward and downward slowly for a little while, and then ultimately we're going to be on our way upward again.
How do you feel, though, Todd? You heard all these notions bounced around recently about the U.S. Open potentially in Florida with no spectators, or in California with no spectators, the Roland Garros potentially no spectators. Do you feel that's the answer, or are we better off to wait till next year when potentially we could have the fans back in the stands and do it the traditional way?
Well, sport's really important. In my estimation, sports wasn't meant to be a public spectacle when it was created, but it's become that, and it's something that gives us enjoyment, things to look forward to, analysis, ways to imagine potential. It's got so much to it. From a tennis standpoint, I would rather see tennis active during this time than not, but not at the risk of health, and not at the risk of challenging businesses to survive this any more than they're already being challenged. So no matter what is of urgent focus in the sport, by the slams, by the tours, by the ITF, by the individual tournament owners, the players, every one of us has real challenges for today. The most important thing will always be 2021, 2022, and how do we ensure coming out of this crisis in a positive way? for the sport, for the business of the sport, and for the health of our communities.
I have two questions. One is a question, another one is a congratulation. The question is, I saw that the tournaments will be played from the 11th to the 18th of 2021. And this year it was also from the 11th to the 18th. So how come? I mean, you were starting on Saturday this time, and next year cannot be. You start on Sunday. Then how it goes? I mean,
no. This year it was the 12th to the 19th. So Sunday to Sunday this year, and 11 to 18.
Today in your press release there was written 11. But anyway, it's okay.
Ubi, come to work at the Hall of Fame, and you can be the editor, okay?
Only when I will be Hall of Famer, of course. But anyway, no. And the question, instead, I want to congratulate, because in the press release there was written that about the tickets, spectators can do either donation or deferred or refunded immediately. The same day that you announce that the tournament will not be held, you say this. In Rome, at the moment, we only have donation, because nobody knows what happens with the money that the people spent to buy the tickets. Still, I receive tons of letters by Italian fans who say, what's going on with the Italian Tennis Federation? We don't know. We have no idea about our money. They say they may be playing in Turin or in Milan indoor, or maybe next year, and nobody tells us anything about the money. And some of them would like to have the money back. While you were very quick in reacting to this situation, so I want to congratulate you.
So thank you. The easiest way for me to answer that question is to make a couple of points. One, for us, it was very clear. There was no other alternative. There was no opportunity for us to play in October or September as a grass court tournament in the middle of, so that makes it very clear. And second, it's the product of a lot of work to devise a strategy for how to try to attempt to retain as much of the proceeds of the tournament as we can. It's something that's expected in the U.S. I can't comment what the expectations are in other areas, but we knew that the tournament was going to be canceled. We knew that we were going to have to make this offer today for a little while. So this was not our first draft at how to handle the situation.
Okay.
And also, there's a lot of examples to follow out there right now, right? Everybody's being canceled. What are the ways for us to do this?
Todd, what are your concerns, though, if these tournaments do take place with no spectators? Let's say that the French and the U.S. Open managed to pull it off, but how concerned would you be about having to test players on a daily basis? How do we get around the problem? You eliminate the fans, but then you have the players are in locker rooms in close quarters, having to come in and out of there every day and showering and the rest of it. How can that be handled?
Well, the big thing here, Steve, is not can we handle it once we start. It's can we imagine that we can handle it. The operational challenges are limitless. The travel restrictions for the players are number one on the list right now. I think initially it was, how do we imagine not losing money on an event by not having fans come to the venue? you know, once you do enough math, you can probably get to a point where you realize if we do a little bit more here and a little bit less here, we can probably figure out how it would make some sense. And just from the US Open standpoint, they have stated from the beginning, as long as they don't lose money, they want to have the event because it's important for the sport and it's important for this nation. The challenge then, by the way, that's my dog.
Good.
The challenge that prevails, that persists for now, and frankly, if I were to have to recommend something today for others, I think it's the challenge that prevails, and that is the travel and the provisions that are necessary for the player body. We don't know what the travel restrictions are going to be in August and September, but we're talking about dozens of different nations being represented by hundreds of players. They're not all coming from the same place. They're not all leaving to the same place. And I think that, to me, that's the one concern that persists. And I just don't imagine there's a solution to it, but I know for a fact there are tons of people thinking about it and trying to solve this problem. And it's our sport's own little 9/11. You know, there's people who typically don't work together who are partnering and trying to figure out solutions. And I hope they can. And then I hope that the partnering sustains as well.
This, not only Newport, but all the tournaments in July have been cancelled by the ATP, and 4 of the WTA, while 2 of the WTA are still hoping to hold the tournaments, and they are, one of them is Palermo. And in Palermo, in the last 5 days, they didn't have any people ill because of COVID-19. And yesterday they had 39 degrees. I don't know how many there are in your way of measuring the weather, but I mean, they would have been all swimming if they could, from Palermo. And the tournament director of Palermo just spoke with him a few minutes ago, and he told me that, you know, he would like to wait until the 3rd of August, because he says that maybe August in Europe would be better to play than in September or October, because he's afraid that in September and October there will be possibly a comeback of the virus if they haven't, you know, killed it. And so he says, you know, Europe, in his opinion, should try to play some tournaments instead of those ones which are programmed right now, which are scheduled right now, because he is not optimistic about September and October. What do you think yourself? And of course, one last point, he said, maybe if Palermo will be the first tournament to be played in WTA, it will be like a slam, because all players are free. If they can come, if the airplanes fly, everybody would come. So I mean, that's a try.
Yeah, Ubi, I do think that at some point in time, this is not about. I think we have to. I think we have to remember that this is a tour. The WTA is a tour, the ATP is a tour. And although we're a partnership of members, of independent contracting players and independent promoters, I think what really needs to happen is our sport needs to unite in one effort. If it's appropriate to have professional tennis being played, it's got to be appropriate everywhere, and let's get going, or at least on on a certain trail, so there's continuity. The notion that there's a Palermo, but then there's no other tournament for 4 weeks until something else. That's not what we need. That's not I don't think that's what's safe. I don't think that's what sustains the health of our sport. I think what we need is to trust the leadership of the governing bodies, and they're going to make the best decision for the sport and for the health of their members. And I think we all have to accept that those decisions might not agree best with our individual business interests.
Sure. Steve, go ahead, Steve, because I don't want you to shut up. I want you to talk.
I'm listening. I would like to ask Todd what he thinks about the notion of you for a 1-year trial period becoming the commissioner of tennis.
I don't think that's a good idea.
Good answer.
I think a 1-year trial of a commissioner in tennis is a good idea. But generally, I mean, we're all familiar with Billie Jean King's vision from decades ago, and Roger's tweet and Rafa's support of his tweet. Yeah. I think that's all well and good. In a perfect world, partners unite when they're at the top, not when they're at the bottom. Pete and Andre were the 2 best players in the world for a good bit of the 90s. And they could have united and played as the Davis Cup, and the US would have won Davis Cup maybe in our sleep. Those guys were just so good. But they didn't see that as the opportunity.
Many places, even Villa St. Clerc.
Exactly.
Yeah, they were great.
Our sport, Connors and McEnroe, I mean, there's a lot. Our sport would be so well served to unite. The fact of the matter is, necessity might bear it, right? Necessity is the mother of invention. Necessity might force us to put down our borders, to put down our arms and say, we've got one sport, and we're going to make sure that we succeed with that one sport. Let's take everybody, let's put our assets into the pie, try to grow that pie, and we'll figure out how to divvy that pie up. There's too much pain that's going to be experienced here in the next 12 months to feel good about that. But I do think there is going to be good that can come from this crisis, and that is to imagine a new business model for our sport, to imagine tournaments and players not being oppositional, to imagine women's tennis and men's tennis being unified. There's a lot here, and as dreaded as this all is, there is going to be some positives that come from it. I'm confident of that.
We forgot to say before that you have been also president of the ATP Player Council from 95 to 99. So at that time, if they would have asked you, would you join ATP and WTA? Would have you tried to have same prize money, same everything? Do you think things have been changing a lot since then or not?
Well, I think a couple of things. One, I think our sport wasn't structurally ready for that. We didn't have as many combined events. We didn't have. I think both tours were still in such building mode that I don't know if it was necessarily ripe to happen. However, I think that if some wise people were coming from the past and saying, let's do this, and there was a path towards that solution. I probably wasn't wise enough as a 25, 26-year-old player to imagine how to do that. But I would hope that if the right people were in my ear, I would have, and the player council has then had very little power, more because Roger and Rafa and Novak have taken hold of it here the last decade. But I did have the ear of the CEO. I had the ear of the influential decision makers at the tour. It would have been nice to have been armed with some wisdom from the past, from the historical figures, to nudge us in that direction.
Did you have a chance to talk to Andrea Gaudenzi? I mean, of course, you played in Milwaukee, but not you personally, but I mean the team. But apart from that, did you have a chat with him recently or not about all these matters?
So I spoke with him immediately prior to the challenges with the virus. So, and then I've been on a couple of calls with him, in group form. I really like his vision. I think that his is a vision of commercial unification, not necessarily governance unification. I approach things probably a little bit more from the governance side of things, but I do think that Andrea's vision of unifying and aggregating media rights puts us in a position to better unify our sport, and probably is the best course, the best path towards that unification, rather than looking at it from the governance side of things. Governance in our sport is not necessarily governance; it's politics. Yeah. If we can attack it from the commercial side of things, a dollar has a square has a fairly consistent exchange rate to the euro, to the British pound, so forth and so on. I think that's probably our most viable way to coming towards some unification.
I have two personal questions for you, and the last, because I don't want to keep you busy too long. And Steve is hungry. At this time he wants to have lunch. Well, one is if your son, how is your family? How is the situation in Newport? Newport is not New York, and I think and I hope that also the virus is not so strong as somewhere else, but you may confirm or not. Then I wanted to ask you about your son. I know that your son is now, he could hold the racket. Does he hold the racket? Does he play tennis? Do you hope that he become a tennis player? And finally, if you are still too handicapping golfer, because apparently you had a great hand, and I didn't see you playing golf. I didn't see you playing snooker, how do you call it, the other sport, and apparently you were one of the best. So I'd like to know if there was someone also in golfing playing better than you between the tennis players or not. Even Lendl maybe, I have no idea.
Well, let's see. First of all, Rhode Island is okay. Rhode Island is, I would suggest that we've been well governed to this point in time. I feel like our governor has done a really good job. We are right in between Boston and New York, which are the two of the hotter of the hot spots, but we're also small and on an island, so I think we're as good as we could hope to be at this point in time from the pandemic standpoint. my three children are 17, 14, and 11 now, and none of them have a tennis racket in their hands, but they are all passionate about their own outlets, which is exactly what my parents allowed me to do with tennis, and what my wife and I set out for our kids, and thank goodness they've all found their destinations or their passions. And then with respect to recreative pastimes such as golf and billiards, I'll put it this way. I still love to play golf. I don't get to play very often. I'm somewhere between a 3 and 4 handicap, but don't feel as good about it as I did when I was a 2. I was never the best tennis player golfer, for sure.
Who were they?
However,
who was?
Well, Scott Draper was I think by far. And then there were a bunch of guys who were really good after that. One of them is Tim Henman. Now, Tim, I hope, is listening, because he is one of my dear friends in tennis, and he is a better golfer than I am, but I beat him the last 3 times that we played. So, and that's all he does, right? I mean, he just golfs. So, and then with respect to billiards, I don't play anymore, but I'm pretty confident I was the best, and I will continue to be the best billiards player in tennis.
Okay.
Ubaldo, you got to congratulate Todd. You asked him 5 questions in one, and he answered all of them succinctly.
Yeah, you wouldn't be able to.
I couldn't have handled it.
No, that's true. But really, it was really a pleasure to talk with you. I don't know if, Steve, you still have a last how do you say, shooting
I
question.
do. Just a last quick one, Todd. Just to get, you described those great moments in your career, and as you got into your 30s, it was harder to sustain it. It was a logical time to stop in 04. How do you explain this generation? So many guys in the, we're going to see them resume hopefully soon, but not even just Novak and Roger and Rafa, but so many guys playing well into their mid-30s in a way that really wasn't true in your generation.
I think there's a lot of ways to attempt to explain it. I don't think there's one answer. I think what I look at is probably at the top of the list is sports science. So you have to imagine that all of them are informed with much better science to keep their bodies in shape, to keep their minds at peace. I think that all of them are pretty unique physically as well. I think the economics of the sport help. They understand that they are corporations, and they employ a staff for their corporations to make their lives feasible. And I think that ranges all the way from traveling with nannies for children to traveling privately to hiring the best strength and conditioning coaches you can find. But I think all of those are almost necessary for them to achieve what they've achieved as far as longevity is concerned. The others are tour calendar, ranking system, so forth and so on. There's some other sort of elements of tennis, but the core, and none of that matters unless their core is not massively passionate about competition. And then I think with all of them, they have a love for the sport, and I'm talking about Serena, Novak, Roger, and Rafa in particular, and they have a love for the sport, and they take a responsibility for it, and they relish that, which is not something that world-renowned athletes have always been quick to do. I think that's not athlete nature, if you will.
Well, I remember that in 2003, you were 33 years old, and you were the second oldest player to finish in the top 100. The first one was Andre Agassi, then it was you, and then Olianaui, Ferreira, Bjorkman, Sanguinetti, Santoro, and so on. But there were only 11 players over 30 over in the top 100. And nowadays it's completely different. I mean, apart from those names that you mentioned. I mean, so it has really changed a lot. Probably there is also, is it also more difficult to come out of the top 100 once you are there? I mean, I don't know if because you play the slams, there are some kind of also rules that help you, if you're fit, to stay there. I mean, and it's more difficult for the other players to come in.
So I think there's some data that demonstrates that the top 100 turnover is not really necessarily different than it was 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. What I think is different, though, is we've got the bottom 25% of that group that is turning over back and forth, whereas and I think that's based on the ranking system, which is your point. The ranking system, the notion of there's 2,000 points to win the Grand Slam, 1,000 points to win the Masters 1000, 500 to win the ATP 500s, and 250 to win the ATP 250s. It's really clean. It's really clean. However, it does establish some not glass ceilings, but it definitely establishes some softer barriers from level to level. I believe strongly in that. I don't necessarily believe that that's a problem, but I do believe that when you're comparing generations, you have to take into consideration that the ranking system that Sampras dominated under was different than the one that Federer dominated under. And even the draw formats to seed 16 at the slams versus 32 at the slams, that dictates the results of tournaments quite a lot more than people give credence to.
Listen, I am very happy and I must thank you very much for being with us, even with Steve Flink. I mean, you must accept his
Todd, don't you think I'm taking too big a beating in this? I mean, he's clobbering me today.
You got to fight back, Steve. Fight back.
But no, really, having you been called the marathon man, I thought you could last also this marathon. I could have kept you here for 5 hours like at the US Open, but I leave you free now. And I must say that I had a lot of fun, and personally I enjoyed a lot. You're a very nice guy. You mentioned before your friendship with Tim and Henman. You both were and are two gentlemen, and so I'm not surprised that you feel each other well, you know. I feel good because you're similar in a way. Always, you both won sportsmanship award. You've been always appreciated for your fair play and other reasons. So thanks again a lot, I had fun. I hope Steve had fun too.
Oh, I had great
hope
fun.
you
Todd has always been one of the most thoughtful players around, Ubaldo, and I think that Hall of Fame is very fortunate to have him at the helm.
Okay, so thanks, and see you soon. I hope around the tennis court with some people playing and maybe some crowd applauding. Huh?
That would be nice. Thank you both.
Thank you, Todd.
All right.
Now I must know if I'm able to stop the recording, because that is always something that I'm not sure. Here we are. Ciao, ciao.
You got it?
Okay,
I'm gonna hit the leave button so you two can talk.
Yeah, Ubi, you got another minute for me?
Yes.
Okay, bye, Todd.
See ya.